monogamy has been an imposition on women forever, all over the world, primarily in order for him to know to whom do the children belong and who will get the cows when I die. It's about patrimony and lineage. It had very little to do with love. It had nothing to do with love. Spend the day at your screen, you come home, you take more time at another screen with your phone in hand while you're sitting next to somebody, and you're surprised that there is nothing happening and no energy and no butterflies. This is part of an old narrative, and half the time it's lies. It's lies. It's not true. Come into a therapist office and you'll hear the truth. Humor brings perspective. Humor brings lightness and levity. Humor takes you out of your goddamn seriousness and I can't value humor and playfulness enough. There is what people fight about, and then there is what people fight for.
I'm probably assuming the audience is somewhat familiar with you, which I know is always a mistake. So I'm actually I decided I'm going to jump into some sort of doozy relationship questions that I think you can really knock out of the park, because I want people to know what they're dealing with in terms of, I don't want to waste any time, with Esther Perel. It takes half a decade to get it something booked. And
what have you gotten from me, Jordan? Maybe we start with that.
Yeah, well, we can do that. I have some stuff that I think will apply to a lot of folks who write into me for advice. And it's hard to pin you down with a handful of topics that fit into one show, because we've known each other for so long. I've known your work for so long. It's like, if we had 12 hours, fine, but I've got to pick the top 10% of the stuff that people write in with. So let's start with cheating, because candidly, it's juicy and you got to hook them early, Esther, with this. So I've heard you say about cheating that people don't necessarily want to leave their partner. They just want to leave what they have become, and they want to get in touch with another part of themselves that they miss. And this, I think, is really profound. And I would like to flesh this out a little bit, because I think it might give people the understanding that they might need not to blow up their relationship with cheating, or if they're already cheating, at least they better understand why they're doing it, and they don't go from one affair to another thinking they're going to find something in someone else.
So there's 3 questions in this one. I'm going to try to break it down. And I don't necessarily think that cheating is always the best word to even frame infidelity, affairs, transgressions, betrayals. It's a very vast experience, the world of cheating. In that experience, I have said that affairs also happen often in good relationships. They're not just symptoms of relationships that have gone completely awry. Then I'm asked, how so? And I say, I think one of the most important sentences I heard over 10 years of doing this research was that sometimes a person goes looking elsewhere, not because they want to find someone else, but because they want to find another self. When we are in a relationship, we enter a role. We become the father, the mother, the provider, the subjugated, the responsible, whichever, And there is something about that transgression that often says, it's not that I want to leave you, I wanted to leave what I have become. That doesn't justify it. That doesn't give it permission. That just explains that sometimes it's not about the relationship, but it's about the individual. And it's not against you, but it is for me. And that said, that for me can be very hurtful still. Mm-hmm. If people find themselves in a recidivist positions where it's basically one after the other, then you often know that it is not about the relationship. If any time with a person says, look, this has happened to me every time, I end up with somebody else, I check out, I disappear, I lose my sexual interest, then you know that you're saying to the person, you need to check what's happening to you, and don't make this a story about your partner, who may think if I was more of this or more of that, then this wouldn't happen. So it's very important. What is relational and what is individual, and where do you start to make sense of this complicated and often very painful experience?
This makes a lot of sense. I've got a lot of friends, and I know people are like, "Oh, friends, huh?" But I probably have to disclaim that these are not my relationship questions. These are mostly things that people have written in about. No one's going to believe me when I say that, but whatever. Um, I have a lot of friends who will say things like, "Man, I love my wife, but I want to do this, or I want to go and live in another country and just do that." And it doesn't sound like they have any issue, to your point, with their relationship. It seems like they just miss being young and free. Now they've got two kids, they've got a mortgage, their job is they're a quality control engineer somewhere, and they're like, well, I thought I'd be inventing new kinds of airplanes for the Air Force or whatever. And they just want to like hit a reset button and go on a vacation from their actual life. And the way that they do that is by just pretending they have no responsibility to anyone else or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So everybody does. He and she and they.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a gender specific thing. You enter a relationship, you enter a family, and what we often do is it becomes security here and adventure there, responsibility here, playfulness there, love here, sex there. And that is often the way people divide it. They're filled with imagination about the adventures they would have. And sometimes you kind of want to say, do you ever bring any of that imagination home? You would feel that home can be quite fun as well. But you kind of bring a part of you home. And this relates to the question you asked me before. And then you bring the other parts elsewhere. The fact that people long for freedom or lack of responsibility or kind of no boundaries for a moment. Yes. Now, what do they do with their fantasies? Some relationships say take a few weeks and go have your thing, take a week and go and travel alone or go with a friend, go rafting, go do. You don't, and there is room in the relationship for that. In other relationships that's not the case, and so it remains a fantasy. By definition, the question you want to ask is, to what extent is the security and the stability that you are creating in your life an anchor for you that allows you to then ride the waves? Or to what extent does it become like a straitjacket and one day you're going to bolt? And if you bolt, you do have to ask yourself, what did I do to create a life that felt so constraining that I had no other option but to leave it rather than to sometimes step out of it? And that's a pity, because that's a responsibility we should carry. We can create our relationships today with options that we never have had. And don't make it, I'm the adventurer and my partner is the bore.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I think I see dynamics where the guy wants to travel a bunch or the woman wants to travel a bunch and the guy doesn't do that. So it does end up setting up where one person it's like this cliche, like, oh, the old ball and chain, right? That's an old expression that a lot of men used to use probably in the 50s or something. Like, oh, she will never let me do anything. But I see it with both sides of relationships now. And it's great if each person has a way to, like, the guy goes rafting and during that same week or even a different week, depending on childcare, the woman gets to go take her culinary school thing in France or whatever. And you get this little vacation that brings you back to your young free self without, I don't know, bringing home an STD or whatever it is, or some dark secret. If the other person isn't developing or doing this, you're right. It's really easy to put one person into a bucket. And I think that's dangerous as well. My mother-in-law is very perceptive with this kind of thing. She told my wife, and I don't necessarily agree with this because I think my wife is doing just fine. But my mother-in-law said, you need to be developing yourself like Jordan is. He's working out, he's learning languages, and he goes places. If you don't do that, he's going to outgrow you. And I don't love that my mother-in-law is scaring my wife like that, but I think she means well. And she's saying something very similar maybe to what you mean with your advice here as well.
So it's a fascinating thing that you're asking me, because, marriage or committed relationships of any sort, hetero or same sex, never had at its core personal development.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not why people made families or married or, so this in itself has to be seen as a very recent thing. It's like the marriage for self-development, the one that's going to help me become the best version of myself. beyond security, stability, family, children, etc. Now we also have, climbing Mount Olympus, from which you have a fantastic view. And those of us who climb do get that view, but not everybody gets to climb. So some couples live very much as overlapping Venn diagrams. We do everything together. We go to sleep together. We wake up together. We see the same movies, etc. Some couples live much more in a differentiated fashion. We have a strong core. We share a few things that are really important to both of us. And we have a rather large zone of that is personal, be it professional, social, spiritual, any artistic, other interests. There's not one model. So that's the first thing, is there's not one model. When you describe the guys who talk about the ball and chain, it always reminds me of the guys in the locker room.
Yeah.
I have yet to hear a guy in a locker room talk about how his wife wants to jump him and he's not interested.
Yeah.
So there is a social value to the idea that the man wants more adventure, sex, this, that, and that, he's constrained. He's with somebody who is not letting him or giving it to him. This is part of an old narrative, and half the time it's lies. It's lies. It's not true. Come into a therapist office and you'll hear the truth.
Yeah.
You'll hear the story is very, very different. But whenever you have a couple where one person talks about the other one won't let you, the let word is problematic. What is this? What are we talking about here? It's like, what do people give each other permission? Do people respect each other's needs? Do they say when one goes, be it for the night, and I'm not talking sex, I'm talking just go out with a friend. Do they say, have a great time? Or do they say, again, you have to go out? If I say, have a great time, then I breathe freedom in the midst of security. I say to you, go do that thing that you love to do that is not interesting to me or that I'm not a part of or that you prefer to do alone, because it's not the same when we go together and when you go see your buddy on your own. And while I say that, when I say have a fantastic time, you have a much more stronger inclination to want to come home, because we want to come back to the places that respect our freedom or our needs or our individuality, and vice versa, versus the ones that make us feel that every time we do something for ourselves, we're taking something away from someone else, provided that the other pieces that are in the realm of responsibility are attended to. So your mother-in-law, she says to her daughter, don't forget yourself. He pays attention. Whatever it is that he's doing, he pays attention to himself and he takes time for himself. And he doesn't just think that the burden of caretaking is what defines him. He thinks that it's not just he will look good. He will feel good. He feels that he invests in himself. And don't lose yourself in the relationship, which is a danger, primarily for women, also for men, but historically more so for women. How do I stay connected to myself when I'm connected to someone else has always been more of a women's concern. Historically, today, I don't think there is necessarily a difference, but that's the root of what your mother-in-law is telling to her daughter.
Yeah, it's a clash of cultures in some ways, or at least of eras for my wife, and she's always bouncing this off me. And it's
what does
hard.
she answer to her mom?
I don't know. I'm not there for this conversation, but I think she's probably like, yeah, okay, I know. Or I hope she tells her what she's really doing, which is a lot. It's just a lot of invisible things. Maybe she doesn't go a week away with her friends or something like that, traveling, but she's working out. She learns all these different skills, whether it's something cooking new meals or something like that, which she actually enjoys. I know it sounds domestic or whatever, but she actually likes doing this. And
do you think she would appreciate you putting her on a plane or in a car for a week with people?
I don't think she would want to do that. No, I think she's more like, can you please just give the kids a bath so I don't tear their heads off because it's been 12 hours of screaming in my face. I think that's what she really, I think that's what she wants. I don't know. I should ask her. Maybe that's a good idea. What do you think? Maybe I should actually ask her what she wants.
I absolutely think you can ask her what she wants, but I can also suppose that by now you probably have an idea
Yeah.
of what she wants because she told you. So it could be to say, I'm handling things today. You
Yeah.
have a day off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
She needs a
and
break.
leave. You leave with the little ones and leave her to be alone in the house. Because what happens when you're an adult in that situation is that the only time you can be on your own is when you are away from home. And sometimes the biggest pleasure is to have the home empty and just to yourself and for more than a half an hour.
Yeah.
So you want to do her good? Go
That's a
ahead.
good idea. Yeah. Like turn on Netflix. I don't even, it's been so long since she's watched it. She probably doesn't even know how the remote works anymore. We gotta look up the instructions.
So you have an assignment right
Yeah.
there.
A lot of times people write in for advice and they'll ask things like, I've got a crush on somebody at work, or I have, what is it, butterflies for them like I haven't had from my current partner or in a long time or forever. Is this our imagination playing tricks on us? Is it the grass is greener on the other side of the fence? You already sort of answered the other third part of this, which is, does it reflect something about our current relationship, which it may not. So is this a trick
Or
that our
it
mind
may.
plays? Or maybe it does. Yeah,
No,
maybe it
no,
does.
it's absolutely not a trick of the mind. The mind is not playing a trick on you when you experience that. The first question, look, this goes back to the question of the affairs that you asked me. I have
Yeah.
more than once said to people who tell me my partner doesn't do this to me anymore, or I don't feel those feelings anymore. I said, but you're not the same person coming home than the one who is going to see the other person. If that person came home, maybe your partner would be more interested in you as well. It's so easy to always think it's the other person who lacks, who's a boring, who doesn't do anything, who is not inspiring, etc. And to think that we call it fundamental attribution error. It's a way that we think that if the partner is, if we are not available, then we just say it's because I was really busy and I just didn't have much time to pay attention. But if our partner doesn't pay attention, then it's because they don't have the right energy and they're not in the swing of things, and they're characterological and ours is circumstantial.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to do this. So when you have butterflies for someone else, you just say first and foremost, wow, it's a nice thing that I can still feel this. I haven't felt this in a long time. Now, how come? Where have I been, or where have we been? What are we doing to maintain a little bit of intensity or energy or erotic spark between the two of us? And I'm not talking sexual spark, I'm talking about aliveness, vibrancy, vitality, playfulness, curiosity. Do I have the same kind of curiosity and I come home with a question to my partner of something that I want to know about them? I show interest, or do I sit on the couch and I do this with my phone while I'm watching TV and I make them feel that whatever they tell me, it's not worth it for me to even lift my head? This is what's going on in a lot of people's homes. You spend the day at your screen, you come home, you take more time at another screen with your phone in hand while you're sitting next to somebody, and you're surprised that there is nothing happening and no energy and no butterflies. If people treated their partner like they treat their clients or their best friends or these people that they suddenly are meeting, there would be a different energy in the house. It's not just that it leaves because of time and couples who have an erotic spark, they are deliberate, they're attentive, they make an effort, they create it. They don't just slouch on the couch and with the head down without an interesting conversation about anything except, did you do this and did you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I see this a lot, especially with parents that have little kids. People are asking me, do you have this? Is this something that you're dealing with? Because I think little kids, it's really easy to get distracted by, work or family. I like the idea of harnessing that feeling in some way that doesn't get us into trouble, right? I guess before you can look at this as sort of like an indicator that something is definitely wrong with your relationship, or you can look at it as an indicator that you need to change something about your own behavior inside the relationship. And I think that's probably the best way to look at it. And it's a creative way to. It's a good sort of check engine light for your relationship, I suppose.
Yes. I mean, and, imagine Imagine that you say, "Oh, it's something is really wrong because my partner is always complaining."
Mm-hmm.
The next question then comes, and what do you do then? I mean, nobody started out complaining. They probably asked you nicely at first. Then they started to ask you more insistently. Then, when you have a nag, always ask yourself, what am I doing to raise the volume of the nag rather than just, I have a nag? When people feel heard, they don't nag. When people feel attended to, responded to, and they don't have to see 100 times the same question. So the difference between there's something really wrong in my relationship and what am I doing that contributes to that, they are interconnected questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite fascinating, and I love the idea that everything. I think essentially a lot of times our partner's behavior is a reflection of our own or ourselves, right? So, like you said, with the nagging,
it's not a reflection, but you're involved in it. It's like relationships are a figure eight. I ask you, you don't answer, so now I ask you louder, but now you don't answer again, so then I ask you now. It's like one person is reinforcing the very behavior in the other that they actually don't want. If you want the other person to stop talking, then say something. But if you're going to keep quiet until you explode, for example, I'm just thinking about the couples I've seen yesterday and today. Yeah. But, the point is, much of couples' life, when things begin to go a little bit awry, is often putting the responsibility on the other person without paying attention enough to what can I do to make this better? Or in what way am I contributing to my partner feeling the way they do? If I really care, that should be a normal question rather than stop, busting my chops. And that's that. I'm a couples therapist. Yeah. People come to me like a drop-off center.
What do you mean?
Meaning, here's my partner.
Oh,
I'll tell you what is. I'll tell you. I'm an expert. I'll tell you, and you fix it, and I'll help you. Yeah. So you change a relationship. You start by saying, "What's the one thing I can control?" So yes, you're right. I've experienced butterflies somewhere. No, it doesn't have to become the beginning of a downfall. And I'm thinking to myself, I want this in my life. I'm missing this. So can I have a conversation with my partner where I say that? Are you missing this too? What's happened to us? Do you feel like we've just gone completely flatlined here? Do you miss something? Does it matter to you? It matters to me. What could we do? That's then because you don't have to solve it alone, but you basically say, I want these butterflies, or I want a certain kind of energy or intensity or engagement. I just don't want to feel like my passion is at work and the best of me goes to work and the leftovers come home. Mm-hmm. But that's a part of my responsibility too.
Why do you think we as a society have such completely different ideas about why men and women cheat? I think the stereotype is that men cheat for variety and novelty and women cheat because their emotional needs are not being met. And it doesn't seem like that's accurate given what we've discussed today.
No, look, monogamy has never been an equal opportunity or fidelity, right? I mean, men have basically had a license to cheat throughout history. And all kinds of evolutionary theories came to justify that. They have different hormones, which they do. They are more inclined, etc., etc. But basically, monogamy has been an imposition on women forever, all over the world, primarily in order for him to know to whom do the children belong and who will get the cows when I die. It's about patrimony and lineage. It had very little to do with love. It had nothing to do with love. It was an economic arrangement in order to know provenance, which is the one thing that men have never been able to ascertain until very recently with DNA test, was provenance. Is this my kid? Whereas he can go everywhere and nobody knows. But if she goes somewhere, something may happen. So why do we think that men want sex and women want love? Because every gender gets license given by society about what is supposed to be important for them. And it is acceptable for men to say they want sex But it is not acceptable for men to say they want love or connection or intimacy or tenderness, which are all forbidden emotions that men often access through sex. And it is not okay for women to say they want sex, but it is okay for women to say they want love. So every gender has been given a license for what are the needs that are acceptable and what are the needs that are not. And from that place, we will say men cheat for sex, women cheat because they're lonely. No, it's not necessarily the case. And it is also is the different in many, many different cultural contexts. But basically, give the woman a car, give her a place where she can be autonomous. And the stats are very clear that the differences are not nearly as innate as we think. The differences have been primarily cultural and biological.
Yeah, I love that because it makes it a lot easier to understand our partner if we realize that the difference or the way that they think is actually quite similar to the way that we think and operate, and not some sort of like completely different thing because their genotype is different because they got to have an extra chromosome, or not an extra chromosome, a different chromosome. But that's a different issue. Another type of chromosome, and we can't possibly decode the differences in genders and sex. It's
Everybody starts with XX.
Yeah.
And then men become XY.
And then something breaks, and here I am. Yes, or breaks off. I'd love to discuss conflict. I know that some of the work you're working on, I know that some of the material you're working on most recently, and I've heard you say, and maybe even on this show, but certainly elsewhere, ask, don't complain when it comes to your partner. Tell me more about that.
So, two questions, right? Why am I interested in conflict? And then how can people diffuse conflict?
Sure. So, I mean, I was going to get there, but go ahead, Esther. You're the expert.
But the complain it's complain or criticize, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, John Gottman often says, that behind a criticism, there is a veiled wish. When I say you don't do something, there is actually something that I want. Now I can completely continue and talk about how you don't do, and you don't pick up, and you don't clean, and you don't attend, and you don't, or I can say it really matters to me that. But if I put myself out there and I say what I want, what I need, what I care about, and you don't respond, then I have to deal with the rejection. If I go at you and I criticize you, I experience myself as less vulnerable. Of course, I get much less too. So this is the notion about, ask for what you want rather than criticize or complain for the thing you don't get. It's okay to have wishes. Make them public. That's first. Now, why conflict? Because I think that we're becoming a conflict avoidant society. We are basically experiencing and watching around us massive social atrophy, virtualizing our lives, basically spending entire days at home. You don't have to go out to work, to exercise, to eat, to see movies, nothing. So, where are you going to deal with the friction and the close proximity with other people where you learn to deal with difference and disagreements? And so we polarize. We avoid conflict and we polarize. And that's the context in which I said, I need a good 1 hour, very deliberate, specific, not generic talk about argument, fighting, difference, disagreement, conflict. The stuff that exists in every relationship and that people are more and more avoiding. People these days tell you, I talk to this person every day, but it's all on text. They never actually see the person. They never see the effect of what they're doing or saying on the face of the other person. I'm talking to you now and I'm watching every response of yours to what I say. I'm not just, talking in the wind kind of thing. So this conflicting is becoming extremely important on a societal level and on a relational level, romantic, friends, work, all of them.
So how can couples, I guess this is maybe not the right question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How can couples argue well? Are there certain rules or vocabulary changes, perhaps? Because a long time ago, I told my wife and I agreed, I should say, that we needed to ditch the you always or you never, people start a lot of things, a lot of sentences with that when they're fighting or arguing, because my lawyer mind just goes to the one time I did or did not do that thing
Of course.
instead of hearing what she actually needs me and wants me to hear. I'm like,
Of
well,
course.
actually, yesterday I did do that. And she's like, fine, you almost never. And then I'm like, well, I'm right because I found a hole in your argument, which is, not constructive at all.
But it's not just your lawyer's mind. Anybody would react this way because you've just been dumped a truth about you that you don't relate to.
Yeah.
So one thing, the always never first, and the you and the accusation and the kind of categorical statement, which is meant to express an impression, an experience, a subjective experience, but is presented as an objective fact and truth. Pseudo-factual talk, that's a good one on the list of the 7-8 things you should not do if you want to fight better. So I'm going to give you, since you started with the ones you don't want to do, a list of the ones that you don't want to do. And if you avoid those, you know that you're fighting better.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of them is this, the categorical absolutes, character statements that present as truth when they are basically meant to talk about an experience. Number 2, kitchen sinking. Yesterday, I saw a person, and the minute they were having a conversation about something, she brought in 5 years of stuff. So put all the piling up, all the dirty dishes in the sink, you can't wash any. Talk about the thing you're talking about and stay focused on that. And don't start bringing in everything else. And when you've lost here, you bring in the next thing. That's another one. Retaliation. Oh, you hurt me? Let me show you. I'm going to hurt you more. That's another big one. Details. It wasn't Thursday. It was Wednesday. It makes a huge difference in the conversation that we are having. Yeah. Being right rather than wise. I have a one-up on you. I have a one-up on you and I disqualify everything you say and I use it. And I do, I weaponize your vulnerability at every turn. Whatever you just said, I'm going to just squeeze you with it. I mean, the repertoire of ways that people can have destructive fights is a very, very imaginative, confirmation bias. I only look for evidence that reinforces my belief. I think you don't care, and all I do is scan for every time you haven't cared. When in fact, we know that in distressed relationships, there's a lot of good that people no longer see because they only emphasize, they're looking for the one thing that's going to strengthen their point of view. That's another cognitive distortion that goes with bad fighting. So what do you do to fight better? The opposite of all of that.
Yeah.
The opposite of all of that. Look, I'm really pissed. This really upsets me. You know how much this matters to me. You stay to the point. You disagree vehemently. You can be vociferous about it, but you don't get into contempt. You don't start just blaming. You accept sometimes when the other person says, yes, but when you did this, that really was, and you don't twist it around. You just own it. You take responsibility and you just say, yes, that's true. I have people, they listen to a list of what the other one is saying, and then they pick the one thing they can disagree with. Mm-hmm. No, acknowledge. Did you up? Did you not show up? Did you forget? Just say, I forgot. Own it. Don't be ashamed about it. Be responsible about it. That in itself shortens the distance. Yes, you are right. I could have done this better. I should have checked.
I don't think I've ever heard you drop an F-bomb before. I wasn't ready for that. You're so right, though, how we generate stories around our partners, friends, family, for that matter, everybody in our lives, right? And then we only look for information that confirms that story. She's always late, or she forgets to put the cap back on the toothpaste, whatever it is, could be big or small. And then you see when they do that, but you don't recognize the other 50 times when they don't do that because of confirmation bias. And then your pet peeves
or when they do
start
other
to grow.
things.
Yeah, sure.
Or when they do other things. Every time you bitch about the thing that you don't want to do, then just think about all the stuff you don't have to think about. Be gracious. The nuclear family life is a bitch, basically. It's really a stressful situation on people, especially if they have, on top of it, young kids, pets, and in-laws, and older parents, and all the other responsibilities of life. We were not conceived to live like this. So don't take it out on your partner. the thing itself is you may want to criticize the thing itself, but fighting well is fighting in a way that doesn't make it feel like you have nothing to lose when you have everything to lose. Fighting well is when you say, if I say this now, well, what will this do to my relationship? Because I could be right, but I will be right and alone.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could be right, but I may not be married to you. Or I may want to be wise, and it doesn't matter if I'm right because it's not going to come across. So protect the relationship is probably one of the big things about how you go tell a friend who is going to agree with you. It's okay. But don't come back home and say my friends all agree with me.
I told everybody about all of our personal problems, and you're the one that's wrong. Yeah, that would not. There's no universe in which that is a good idea. I will say anything my wife does, anything Jen does to annoy me, I am positive that I'm doing something much worse to annoy her, and she just doesn't harass me about it, or she's given up on me fixing some of those things and giving me a lot of grace. So I do try to remember any little thing where I'm like, gosh, she took my washcloth off again. And I'm like, well, she's probably washing it. And if I mention this, she's going to get annoyed because she's going to be like, yes, I did your laundry again. You're welcome. And then I realize that am damn lucky I'm damn lucky someone's taken that washcloth, or I'd be washing myself with a 3-month-old washcloth that never gets cleaned. I mean,
do you say that to her? Not the last part.
I never bring up any of this, actually. I just avoid talking about it at all because I feel like I don't need to bring up that I don't have a washcloth.
No, but do you ever say thank you? No.
I should say thank you. I don't say thank you. No, I should definitely do that. I'm gonna put a note right now to do that.
You know what's one of the best pieces of advice I ever came up with? But I didn't know it. It's people who told it to me afterwards. It was a situation where, the situation is very simple. A person comes home late and they basically apologize, and they think they're being nice because they apologize for whatever, missed the game, missed the dinner, didn't show up, etc. And I said, don't apologize. Because if you apologize, what you're really saying is, whatever I did was more important than you. So you're still all important. It's all grandiose. But if you come home and you say, thank you, I couldn't have stayed without you.
Yeah, that's much better. Oh, I like that. Everybody rewind that and then listen to that again. Yes.
Then I am here at home thinking I'm part of something and not, a mashed potatoes and there is the delicious food somewhere else. The other meeting that is more important than me. I've become a part of it, and we are interdependent. And I know that you rely on me, and you acknowledge that, yes, you could not have stayed another 2 hours if I hadn't been manning the fort here. It changes the entire power dynamic. It changes the interdependence. It changes the feeling, used and not appreciated. All of it. It actually is one of the most important defenders against conflict.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I mean it when I say people hit that back 15 or 30 seconds button on your podcast player and listen to that again. I think that might be one of the most important and easily most practical things that people can use as a result of this. Because I know you're not a person where I can say, give me 3 top tips for not pissing off your spouse. I mean, but that's a really good practical thing that people can sink their teeth into. And I think it could change a relationship for the better if you just frame things like that, because it does frame things as, this is my partner cooperating with me, tag teaming, whatever this life task this life is, and I couldn't do it without them. So thank you for that. Versus, hey, I'm sorry that you had to sit around for 2 hours while I missed everything and you did it all.
Correct.
Yeah.
You got it. Which is why you thank Jen for doing the laundry.
Yeah. I literally made a recurring task on my computer to do that every day until it becomes a habit that I don't have to remember by looking at my task list again. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Remember, you can also enjoy The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our podcast feed is a treasure trove of insights from intellectuals, authors, spies, artists, athletes, pioneers, engineers, former mafia bosses, and business leaders, all sharing their secrets to success. For more information, click the link in the description. Now, back to the show. I also feel like the content of a lot of arguments, not necessarily my own, well, actually my own, sure, everybody's that I see and hear about, it's the content of the argument is never the thing that they're really fighting about. Like it's not about the kids, it's not about this whatever swimming lessons. It's about feeling like the person is not acknowledged or appreciated to your earlier point or vice versa. And it's still strange because even though I feel like I know this consciously, I'll start. My wife and I will start. I say fighting, but I mean whatever, lighter, having a little I
Arguing.
guess something like that in the car, and then it's like, fine, cancel the swimming lessons then, and then it's like an awkward car ride home, and it's like neither of us give a crap about the swimming lessons. It's not about the swimming lessons. It's hard to zone in on the thing that the fight is actually about. Maybe because that thing is deeper and less comfortable than the schedule or the swimming lessons or the
Yep.
teacher
Yep.
thing. Is
You
that
know,
why? Is that what's going on here?
it's what's going on is this. There is what people fight about, and then there is what people fight for. So you fight about the swimming lesson, but what you fight for is power and control. That's the hidden agendas of most fights. Is it an issue of power and control? Whose decision matters most? Who has priority? Is it about care and closeness? Can I trust you? Do you have my back? Can I rely on you? And care and respect and recognition. Do you value me? Do I matter? So sometimes in this instance, you're in the car, say, okay, cancel. What is this for you? What's the thing that really gets evoked here for you? What are you fighting for? What's underneath? And yesterday I had a person, and it was about care and closeness. Can I trust you? Will you be there? And then I said, and why is that the piece for you that is so important? And then you go and layer further, and which you do in therapy, but you also can do sometimes in a conversation. It's like, because people get to know each other. You know Jen, and so by now you know her mom, you know her context, you have a sense, right? So in this instance, she tells me, grew up pretty much with her by herself, took care of the younger siblings. Mother worked alone outside of the house, did the laundry, did the cooking before mom came home, was rather on her own, neglected. And neglected by the needs of the family, not that there was an intent to that. So when he doesn't show up, it's not just he doesn't show up because she can't rely on him. It's, I've always been alone. I've never had anyone I could rely on. People don't come true for me in this way. My whole life will be like this. And I thought when I marry this guy, or when I have a partner, that I will have the support that my mother couldn't give me. That's what I am fighting on. And once you get to that level, you basically it evokes empathy in the other person too, because now it's the freaking swimming lessons are like, and you kind of say, I am here for you. I mean, it's not because I don't want to go pick up the kids at the pool that I'm not here for you. So it's not like I'm going to do everything you ask me, but I have a deeper understanding for why this issue is one of our perennial ones. Yeah. 20 years later, we can still have the same argument in a different form. And that's the what's underneath. It's what you're fighting for. I'm fighting not to feel alone, not to feel like this is the truth of my life. And you were supposed to not to make me, not supposed to, but with you, I was hoping that I wouldn't live this truth again. Everybody has those. So it's three things: power and control, care and closeness, respect and recognition.
That's really interesting. Do you uncover that? I hear in your show and in your therapy sessions, you say things like, so what I'm hearing is, and then you kind of reframe it in different words. I've heard you say that we should, da, 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 something like that. Is that how you uncover those in that conversation?
I mean, you're in the car.
Yeah.
You can just at some point say, look, we know it's not the swimming lessons. What is it for you? I want to actually understand it. I mean, otherwise we're just going to continue have the same, same old, and and sometimes people know and sometimes they don't. She didn't know yesterday. We went and traveled a little bit until we hit the spot, but it's okay to say, what is it? and then sometimes people say it's because I feel sometimes that, you know, many times it's an easy one. If I have to ask you 5 times, you obviously don't care or don't hear what I'm telling you, as if you're doing this on purpose, you know. And sometimes people do, and sometimes they don't. And so it's stepping outside of the tiny frame and just saying, what is it you think you know when you what, and then what's it for me, and the very question, this is the important piece here. It doesn't really matter so much what the answer is. It's the fact that the question says, I'm care and I'm curious, rather than I don't give a. I was going to put another F.
Yeah, I'm here for it. That's all right.
I don't give. It's like I don't give a. It's like, I'm just here to make my point, rather than I actually feel that we matter, and I'm not going to say stuff that just makes it feel like, no, I don't at all. This is the level. You don't go into therapy in your relationship, but you just ask a question that says, what are we doing? Why do you think this thing is, every Friday we have the same argument?
I noticed on the show, you almost never recommend people. I don't even know if I've heard you ever do this, recommend that people break up or end their relationship. And I wonder, under what circumstances would you recommend that people just, how do we know if something is actually over?
Yeah. So actually there are more than one episodes where I tell people this is over. Or I said, you better be friends than partners, because as partners you suck, So I do. Here's the thing. I am often cautious on the podcast because it's one-time episodes. It's a one-time session, and I don't necessarily have that certainty in one time. In my practice, it's different. I've worked with you over time, and I've seen where it goes, and I sometimes really have to say, look, your partner is gone. I don't know. I know you're fighting to maintain this, but they're gone. And you need to hear that. Or listen, people, there is nothing to work with. It's death upon arrival. Each of you just comes here to basically say you've done a few sessions so that you can go to the lawyer and then screw the other person. No, I'm not participating in this. Or look, you asked your partner to do a bunch of things and they've done all of this. You've done squat. I don't think they deserve you. So I actually have said a lot of things that are all about this without having to say, I think you should leave on occasion. But why don't I say it just flippantly? Because I don't have to live with the consequences. Only the person who makes that decision has to live with the consequences, and they have to own it. And I think a therapist can be very powerful, and I don't want to be the one to carry your decision. You need to carry it. So if you ask me, I ask, are you asking me what you should do? Or are you asking me because you've already made your decision? And if you made your decision, I'll support you.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people do go to therapy to get cover for something they've already decided to do or not to do. And that's a waste of your time, first of all, I would imagine.
I mean, basically, I know when I'm working towards something, and I know when people are basically posturing. You do get a sense of that. Or when one person has one foot out the door, or when one person is dropping off the other one because they're on their way out. There's a lot of, why are you here? What are you here to do? In the podcast, because it's one session, I do not feel that I can take that liberty. I'm not a therapist. I'm a podcast host that is doing therapeutic conversations. And at that point, only once or twice did I really say to people, yeah, this is.
So the people on the podcast, and to be clear, you really are a therapist, but when you're talking about when you're doing the podcast, you're a podcast host who's doing therapy. Those people have not had a bunch of sessions with you before?
They have never been my patients. No, there are 6,000 applicants to the new season who want to be on the podcast. They are not patients, and they will never be patients. I keep these things two very separate.
That makes sense.
They don't apply with me. They apply with the producers. I show up. They have been chosen. And then we meet, and it is in my office, and it feels like it's a real situation. But that's it. I will see them once, and nobody else has ever seen them.
That's interesting. By the way, I was going to mention this off air, but whatever, here we are. I recognized my friend's voice in one of the episodes, and I was like, did you go on a podcast with Esther Perel? And he was like, send me the link, because I guess he hadn't heard it. And it was kind of funny, because I'm just going off this person's voice cadence, and I was like, did you do this thing where you, and he's like, yes, I did, that was me. So that was kind of funny. Out of all the thousands of people applying to be on your show and all the selection of episodes that I heard, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's John. Here we are.
Was it helpful?
It wasn't
To him?
super serious for him. I think it was more like, yeah, it was. But I think it was more like I don't think he was horrified. I mean, he's the one who applied to be on there. So it was just kind of a funny thing, because he probably thought, no, at least no one's going to know who that is. I can air that dirty laundry.
Here you go.
Yeah. Put that on the Google form. Hey, people might hear this and recognize your voice. You never know.
The other people on the podcast, by the way, I call them spontaneously. They send us voice questions, and then I surprise them with a phone call all over the world.
Oh, wow.
And we do the sessions like that. So there's different formats now on Where Should We Begin?
Yeah.
But all of them exploring dynamics of relationships.
You do some pretty interesting stuff on the show. I think I heard this. There was a particularly intense conflict, and you made people lay on the floor. What was that all about? That was interesting, changing their physiology like that.
Yes. Have you ever tried to have an argument lying flat?
Yeah, I can't
It's much
imagine.
harder.
It's probably
no, we are
quite
mammals.
Funny.
We are mammals. We
Mhm.
fight by charging. We stand upright, we lift our shoulders, we lower our neck, we protect ourselves, and then we attack or defend. That you can't do when you lie flat. So they began having a fight, the usual same old. And I said, let's try do this on the floor. And it indeed instantly changed the physiology, which then made them suddenly completely change affect. What the physicality led into the emotionality, and it's an extremely effective intervention. And it's something you can do at home very easily if you have a tiny bit of humor.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you recommend people, well, one, add humor, because it seems like a really good way to de-escalate things, as long as you don't use humor to avoid the actual issue, which is tempting sometimes. But also, I'm sure there's some science in there, like it chills the sympathetic nervous system or whatever, and is also quite silly trying to have a shouting match while you're staring at the ceiling fan.
I think that humor is underrated. It's such an important salve in relationships. And I do think sometimes it's meant to avoid. And why not? Sometimes you should avoid going into the same tunnel one more time. No, if you have one person in the relationship who can diffuse it and make everyone laugh, it's not sarcasm. It's not, but it's really saying, oh, seriously, we're going to do this again. That it is a gift to the relationship. Humor brings perspective. Humor brings lightness and levity. Humor takes you out of your goddamn seriousness and I can't value humor and playfulness enough. And when people talk about fighting better, they think it's about fighting better. It's actually about relating better. And humor in a relationship is such a recognition of the difference of the other too. It's a way of accepting who you're with.
I love the idea of being able to have healthy conflict. I know it's probably a buzzword in every sort of relationship circle, healthy conflict, but you just see these little cuts that people have in their relationship turn into these festering wounds over years and years if you can't do this right. And I know I'll link to your upcoming course that I think will be out by the time this episode comes out on conflict, so that people can really dig into this, because there's going to be a lot more like the things we discussed in that course, I assume. Yeah?
Yes, plenty. Only.
Okay.
Full,
Only.
chock
Good.
full.
Chock full. Good. That's what I like to see. I'd love to talk a little bit about how you grew up, because I know you grew up around Holocaust survivors. Was it true your parents were the only survivors from each of their families? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Both of them. One came from a family of 9. One came from a family of 7. They both lost everybody and spent each 4 and 5 years in concentration camps.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I grew up in trauma.
Trauma. Yeah. Were you a refugee family? I guess you have to be a refugee
Yes,
family.
my parents were refugees from Poland who came to Belgium, and then they were 5 years illegal refugees in Belgium. And only 5 years later did they become um, legalized. And then our first passport were UN stateless
Oh
passports.
wow. Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't even know they had those. I'd never heard of that. It makes perfect sense for a conflict like that. Are you Jewish, or were your parents just Polish that were pushed out of Poland because of the Nazis were horrible to everyone?
No, they were not gay, not gypsy or Roma, and they were Jewish.
We're
So
Jewish.
those were
Okay.
the three main groups that were
I know that
annihilated.
even I guess this is not a history podcast, but I think even
Hmm.
non-Jewish Poles were also put in camps, were they not? Yeah. So
Yep.
I was
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
curious.
No, no.
Did y'all have the couches covered in plastic? That's what the immigrant families back in Michigan, where I grew up, always had. Plastic on everything. Couch from 1965 looks like it's new, except for it has a butt print in it that goes all the way down to the wood.
Beautifully descriptive. So this is very interesting, this couch metaphor, because I've often used it to describe what I saw was a distinction in the community of Holocaust survivors that I grew up in. And it was, but it's a distinction that I've used for all couples. You know, among survivors, there were those who did not die and those who came back to life. That's what I see in relationships too. Relationships that are not dead, but they're just surviving, and relationships that are living and thriving. It's the same metaphor. And the ones that survived, that didn't die, were the ones who had covered couches and lowered shades. And the world was a dangerous place, and you didn't really take many chances, and you avoided risk, and you didn't trust anybody. And the ones on the other end of this were often what I call the people who understood the erotic as an antidote to death. They understood vibrancy and aliveness and vitality, as a way to just embrace life. They didn't survive for nothing. And those people didn't have any plastic on their couches.
Yeah, it's there is quite the metaphor in the plastic on the couch. Now that you bring that in, yeah, the plastic on the couch, it never really made a ton of sense to me, right? It's like you got to use the thing and really enjoy it. But you're right, the plastic on the couch is we've got to protect this thing, and then it eventually. It's no longer, you don't end up with a new couch that you take the plastic off of. You end up with an old couch that's still worn and used in a different
That's
way
right.
that you just didn't fully enjoy because it had that stupid plastic thing on it that when you laid down just made you feel sweaty and icky.
Right. But
Yeah.
the key word is the enjoy. When you are in survival mode, when you are vigilant, when you see danger everywhere, when you don't take off the plastic, you don't allow for joy and pleasure. That's the piece. It's like, because when you are experiencing joy or enjoyment or pleasure, you're not vigilant. You can't be anxious and experience pleasure at the same time. Whereas when you are in the side that embraces the danger of life as a fact of life, but you are in the erotic experience of it, you're going to live life at its fullest, then you experience pleasure. You can't be watchful and experience pleasure at the same time. And so that's the essence of the word when you say the couch is an old couch that you never got to enjoy. The lack of enjoyment is the key word here.
It sounds like you had a lot of cultures blending together around you. It explains probably why you speak 9 languages. And it sounds like a lot of different foods from day to day, languages from day to day, types of people in the house from one day to the next. And I would guess you became pretty adept at not only flipping languages, but flipping cultures or perceptions, or what's the lens that you look at through the world, right? Because if you're speaking German, you have that German lens on the world. And then if you speak French the next day or the next hour, it's probably a very different lens on that conversation or that social interaction or just on everything that's around you in that moment.
I love when I tour in Europe to be giving a talk in Flemish or Dutch, and then a talk in German, and then a talk in Spanish, and then a talk in French, and then a talk in Hebrew, all within 3 weeks. I love it. I think it's like different parts of me wake up. The conversation is different. it's traveling at multiple levels. It's not just traveling other countries. So yes, languages are very important to me. I work in 7 of them, and it is a gate to the world. And I am a traveler by nature in the way I not just because I travel, but because I like to enter very different worlds of my own.
Were you conscious about learning all those languages? Was it kind of like, I want to know what everyone is saying, or was it just exposure to all these languages over time and you learned them through osmosis?
So we spoke 5 at home.
Wow.
You know, my father was illiterate, by the way. He could not write, and he kind of taught himself to read newspapers. But it's not that there was education. I'm the first who went to college. But Flemish and French are the 2 main languages in Belgium. My parents spoke Polish, Yiddish, and German with each other. So those were floating around. I am schooled in Flemish. I know I have a French accent, but I'm actually from the Flemish part of Belgium, schooled in Flemish. Then I traveled to Italy. Then I got involved with South American music. Then I was in a Brazilian band, stuff like that. You learn in school, you learn traveling, you learn on the pillow, and you learn at home.
On the pillow. That's funny. That is, yeah. Well, that's a different conversation, I suppose. That's so fascinating. Did you ever ask your parents why they survived when other people in their family didn't? Did that sort of define? I know a lot of survivors, they have guilt around that, or they have a story around that.
Look, I was very, very blessed that I had parents who they didn't have survivor guilt. They wanted to live. They fought tooth and nail to stay alive. Like most survivors, they will tell you that the first reason they were alive is because of luck. Just they didn't get round up, they didn't called into the triage of the day or things like that, you know, or that day didn't freeze minus 20, you know, so that they kept their feet and stuff like that, and they could continue work. But after that, I think both of them were always hoping that they would be reunited with family at some point, that somebody was waiting for them somewhere. And they know my whole family of my mother's side went to Auschwitz. My father's family went to Treblinka. And so that was very, very clear to them. But I think they were the youngest in their families. My father always said that he grew up in a tiny village with a horse and a carriage, and it was freezing weather, and he had concrete bags on his back. And he said, you know, we were more prepared than the Jews from Paris and from Greece. We were used to the cold and to the hard life. And we had a wish to live. We were fighting to stay human and to stay alive.
Does growing up in an environment like that contribute to maybe a sense of impermanence or instability at all? I mean, refugees, different cultures, or because I guess that could go either way, right? It could be like, wow, look at this mix of everything and we're at the center of it. What a blessing. Or it could be, wow, I don't know who I am or where we're from or anything. It's just all a big jumble.
No, we were very, very rooted. I mean, my mom's statement was always, "Oh, never forget who you are," because then you know why you're trying, who you want to be, and why you're fighting for, etc. But no, I think it's different. That you know, for me personally, I would say the awareness that at any moment everything can disappear is something that I live very, very intensely. It's a constant sense of awareness and sometimes dread that comes from their story. You know, you wake up one day and your whole life is gone. Mm-hmm. That is very present for me. At the same time, I live as if it's not going to happen. I take risks. I do things. So it's a combination of two things. You know that there is danger, but you live as if you're fearless.
That's very Jewish, I think, in many ways, or at least Jewish as it seems from my family's culture and the other Jews that I know. It's very the whole something bad might happen at any time is very much is that trauma, or is that just
That's
Judaism? I
collective
don't even know.
trauma.
Yeah.
No, it's
Okay.
totally. You live in Canada, right?
No, I live in San Jose, California.
Why did I think you have? Okay, I
Because I'm
thought you
very
have a.
friendly and nice and apologize all the time. That's probably why.
No, I don't think it's necessarily Jewish, or I would put it this way: it's Jewish because it's historically so, because it is part of the collective consciousness of Jews. This is the history. It has repeated itself all along. So that awareness of the impermanence of things, of the, we don't have buildings, we have books for that very reason. No cathedrals. There's books, the stuff you can carry with you because you're about to be in exile once again. So, and the Jews are not the only people in exile. There's plenty of other people in exile too. But if you ask specifically about me, yes, that notion of impermanence, of the world is at any moment can switch in front of you. Don't take anything for granted. Is very present, and in a good way too. That allows you to thank people so that you don't have to think later, oof, I wish I had thanked them more.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating. That sense of impermanence. Did the wide exposure you got as a child lead to this deep understanding of human nature and empathy of the kind that you seem to bring into your therapy sessions in the show, or is that something you developed professionally later on?
No, I think I grew up with it. I had a father specifically who, while he was illiterate, was an extreme humanist. He saved 60 kids on his own. He did a lot of good things for people, and he was probably one of the least judgmental people. And he really taught me not to be quick to judge, and not to just jump on the high horse, and not to accuse without knowing. And he, in a gentle way, he didn't make a speech about it. I just saw it. He always had a way of saying, well, you don't know. You don't know what may have happened to them before, or you don't know what happened in the morning, or just chill, don't judge. And I think having been judged and having been so discriminated and so persecuted, you can come out both sides. You can come out the person who persecutes others and identifies with the aggressor and does to the others what was done to you, or you can come out with a level of kindness toward people that was really, he was adored for those things. And I really picked that up. I think one of the things people will often say about the work is it's firm, it's direct, but it's not judgmental.
How did he save the kids?
He created a black market in the camp, and he had a trafficking of potatoes.
Potato trafficker.
Yes.
My goodness. That's not something you hear every day.
No, he didn't get much else to eat there either,
Yeah.
So he created a whole black market and was able to feed people. One potato more meant another day of life. It's very, I actually, somebody else told me this whole story. He barely kind of, he didn't make a big deal out of it. Somebody else said to me, I'm one of those 60 kids.
Wow. That must have been quite a moment when you found out that your dad saved not only one person, but 60 people in a camp where he was fighting for his own life and could easily have justified just not caring about anybody else.
Yeah. But it's attached to a story, because when I went to the camps with him one day, he described how he fell in love with this woman in the camp, and he had decided I'm going to help her. She had arrived late, she was it was 44, but then he got caught sending her notes. Now, it never occurred to me to ask him who wrote for you, because you can't write. What language did you communicate with this woman? How did that happen? But anyway, I took the story, and he got caught. And then they took him out of the kitchens and back to the factories. And he said, I would have survived 10 days. You didn't last there. But the SS came to him, the German, and said, I eat better when you're in the kitchen. And he put him back in the kitchens. So he didn't just save the kids. Wow. He also fed the...
Gosh, good thing he knew how to cook well. It
literally
saved
cooking.
His life.
My father didn't know to make an egg. No, he just smuggled potatoes.
Oh, I see. They ate more / better. Wow. So even the SS was starving at this point, I guess.
Yes,
in the war.
Exactly. And my father's best friend was the cook. So he cooked the freaking potatoes.
Jeez, wow, that's really something. I mean, gosh, it just shows you how how traumatic and how hard life was even at that point, where the people who were running the camps were like, hey, we need the extra
It was
potato
bad.
every day. That is so awful. All right, well, look, not to be the podcast that brings everything around to AI and artificial intelligence, but I'd like to bring this around to artificial intelligence. And you sort of touched on this at the top of the show, but as an expert in intimacy and human connection, where do you see us heading as a species when everybody can have soon we'll have a bespoke AI in our pocket or even attached to our brain that just wants to make us happy? And one of my worries is that as a society, we already polarize so easily, in part because nobody wants to challenge their beliefs, nobody wants to be uncomfortable, and it's just gonna. I think it's probably gonna get a hell of a lot worse when we don't have to. You think leaving the cap off the toothpaste? Fine, just instead have an AI partner that confirms whatever we want to hear, or my wife doesn't just tell me everything I want to hear, as you might imagine, and I'm worried that we're going to go even further down the tubes socially.
So I have two associations to this. The first is I think I'm very interested in the rise of the other AI, and I call it artificial intimacy.
Clever. Hijack that buzzword. I love it.
This is where we are going. And interestingly, this thinking started for me when somebody created an AI bot of me. Guy broke up with his girlfriend, couldn't get a session with me, and basically decided to create me. And he finds me very useful. He texts me all the time. The AI, Esther, and it's exactly that what you just said. She's pure. She's always available. She never forgets anything. Her personal life never enters into the picture. It's anything fantastic that has nothing to do with the reality of relationships. So then I began to think, what's going on with this AI piece is that, and this is probably where there's a big distinction between relational issues or problems or challenges and the world of technology altogether, which is that most relationship issues are not things that you solve with binaries, zeros and ones.
Mm-hmm.
What you should do with your kid, what should you put grandma in a nursing home? Should dad come and live with you? I mean, those are not right and wrong things. Those are complex problems that you have to hold contradictions. Technology doesn't like that. Technology operates on everything is a yes or no. We simplify the problem to the point where we can have a clear answer. And that clear answer leaves you without a single doubt. We ask, you have Netflix, you have Waze, you have Spotify, you have, if you're single, you have your dating app. I mean, so you have what to watch, where to go, what to wear, what to eat. You are surrounded with predictive technologies that are meant to give you an immediate answer without a single doubt, and that are producing people that are more and more anxious because they can't deal with uncertainty, with doubt, with the unpredictabilities of life. You would think that all these predictive technologies will make us more confident, but in fact, they are making us more and more anxious. And then we talk about a mental health crisis and we don't connect the dots. That's what brought me to be interested in AI. And I'm in one space after another that talks about AI, but wants one person who talks about the effect of AI on relationships, not our expectations of the machines, but what this will do to our expectations of people. When people go to machine therapy, this guy, by the way, he's very satisfied with me on the AI, Esther. He thinks she's giving him very good therapy. But what we know from the research is that he thinks it's very good because his expectations from technology are lesser than his expectations from people.
Oh, interesting. It probably is also telling him largely what he wants to hear, right? Because isn't that kind of what AI does?
Well,
in many ways,
it regurgitates a summary of everything I've said. My podcast is public knowledge, so you get transcripts. But, a good session is not a regurgitation of everything I've said before. A good session is me picking up on you, Jordan, the specificity of you in that situation with your kid, Jen, your friend, whoever, and I come up with something that is tailored for you. I'm not just summing up, the sum total of what I've said everywhere else. That's what makes it meaningful and relevant to you. And that's what strengthens our relationship. So that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of good use to be done with telehealth and with bots. They will help you on symptoms, but the majority of us don't deal with symptoms. The majority of us deal with existential questions.
Yeah, I'd worry that, look, we're joking about never having to unload the dishwasher again or something, but then here's an AI that spends all day telling you how great you are and has absolutely no emotional needs of its own. Not that I do expect people to be in sort of weird parasocial relationships with AI eventually, but I also worry that as the curve of technological development goes up, the curve of personal development goes down. And I don't mean like
Yes.
self-help, but just like
No,
being
it's
able
called
to have a
social
real.
atrophy.
Yes, exactly.
It's
What you
called
mentioned before.
social atrophy. It's really, you lose the ability to deal with nuances, with the unpredictability of people, with smell, with the messes of relationships, with real life. What technology does, what your machine there, what your clean dishwasher is doing is it's taking out all the wrinkles, all the rough edges, all the frictions, which actually are the stuff that we need in order to learn to live with people.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
you got to have those fights about the swimming lessons in the car. You can't fast forward through those things. And I find, back to your points about conflict, that's it helps you grow as a couple, but it also helps you learn about yourself doing things like that, having experiences like that with someone else in a relationship. And that's gonna be gone with AI unless it just pretends to be annoyed with you about something. But it's not gonna be the same thing as much as it might learn how to mimic human behavior and emotion through
I mean,
text.
we are already having these relationships. We talk to Siri constantly. We tell her what to do, and we decide what
Hmm.
accent we want her to have. And Alexa. I mean, we're in it, but there is something on the way to, a fundamental change of what it means to be human.
What accent does your Siri have? I'm curious. I haven't bothered to choose mine.
No, my I don't have. I mean, she's actually totally American, and I never talked to her. But yesterday, my husband put his Google map, and I said, "Why is she speaking with an Australian accent?"
Yeah, it's kind of fun to do that.
He said, "I like the Australian." I said,
Yeah.
"Okay, give her." I mean, you live with a French accent, so you went to pick an Australian one.
There you go.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we do have the relationship. But I think that anyone who has kids and watches what happens with the enormity of time that people are living with the screen and being completely hijacked notices that something is fundamentally changing, and we can pretend not, because we want to be with the wave of the future and with wherever the next energy in the economy goes. But it warrants us to pay attention. It is changing something fundamental in how we relate to each other, and it has political consequences.
Yeah, I do. I've heard you say that modern loneliness, and I'm paraphrasing here, modern loneliness, it often manifests itself as hyperconnectivity. So those who think this isn't happening to me, you might have 1,000 online friends, but you don't have anybody to come and feed your cat while you're away, I think is how you put it.
Yep.
And I worry that it's going to be that on steroids when everybody is talking to an AI and thinks this isn't hurting me. I'm just using this to make my life easier. And then you realize that you can't relate to other people in the same way because it's not as easy.
Correct. Correct. I think, I mean, that sentence to me came out when literally in my office. And then the number of different, then I took the sentence with me and went to check it around the world. How many of you could have somebody that you need to go get a prescription for you at the pharmacy?
Mm-hmm.
What is this hyperconnectivity actually? And to what extent does it, we talk about loneliness, we talk about suicide, we talk about breakdowns of institutions, we talk about the fact that the burdens of the self have never been heavier. But when you talk about it like that, it feels very abstract. When you actually look at the life of actual people, and especially younger people, as I do, it warrants attention. That's I'm not, nobody's turning the clock around, but there are consequences to this that affect the way that we relate, and in any responsible change and progress, it needs to be taken into account.
Esther, I know we're running out of time. It's an honor to know you. It's an honor to be your friend, and I'm
It's
going to
good to
try.
be back with you. We should
Yeah,
not wait so long.
I was just going to say I'm going to have to try harder for you to come back sooner than 5 or whatever years that have slipped by. And I'd love to do it in person. I know that's next to impossible, but I'm determined to figure it out.
Keep going. You get there.
Thanks so much.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube is not the only place that you can check out The Jordan Harbinger Show. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description where you will find access to our shows that don't appear on YouTube, like Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, even lawns, to find out if they're backed by science and logic, or if they're just complete nonsense. Spoiler, many of them are complete nonsense. Also, our Feedback Friday shows where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, all the way down to the bottom of the barrel. And every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful you can take away and apply in your own life and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Life can be hard, yes, but we are here to help. And if you appreciate how we help, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.